Okay, the second rule is strive to be useful. And it can be said a couple of different ways. I've written it here as seek your talent. Seek to be of service. Now, to be of service, to be useful, to develop a talent, you can first focus on reducing pain. You move into a community and someone's driving around on a little four-wheel cart and there's a couple of bumps in the road where every time they go over that, they've got back problems. It hurts them, and you can get a few bags of concrete and mortar and smooth out that bit of the road. Someone can't get their mail because they have a walker and they have to go up and down these steps, and you can get them their mail. You can focus on reducing someone's pain, and you can focus on providing value. But here's why this is such an important rule. Rule 1, develop your ability to meet human needs. And the third human need, love and belonging. How do you belong, and how are you welcomed in community? Well, there's never been a situation where in a group of 100 people, the person who volunteers as much time as possible to help the other 100, the person who listens when someone has a problem, the person who has good ideas and knows how to get things done, the person who loans out books that help other people solve problems, the person who cooks delicious food at the Thanksgiving party, the person who drives safely and doesn't kill anyone's dog. There's never been a person or a situation in a group of 100 people where the person who's providing the most value and reducing the most pain is unpopular. So you're moving towards your human needs of love and belonging. You're moving towards esteem. Usually the things that provide enormous value to your community are things that you aspire to. We all admire people like Jonas Salk for curing polio and this and that because he made a big difference to the community. In just wars, we honor our soldiers. You went out and you kept us safe. In unjust wars, not so much, because it's not really useful. I mean, how useful was it? And this is the tragedy and the betrayal of government. Nothing wrong with the military themselves. How useful was it to drop napalm on innocent men, women, and children halfway around the world in Vietnam? So there's a connection. Like, I'm doing all this stuff, the stuff that's useful. I'm hungry, here's a great dish of food. I need to sleep, well, why don't you try this CD or download on Subliminal Great Sleeping and see how you do. I have some flowers I'd like to share from my garden. I have a way you can spend less time. I can talk to you in a way that helps you feel better about yourself. Seek your talent. And the talent in particular, so you've got two levels of this. You've got books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, and they'll address this in very transactional terms. Try it, you build your network, honor people on their birthday. Joe Girard used to be GM's great, I think it was the greatest salesman in the world for selling GM cars. And Joe just constantly made everything easy for his clients. You had a problem with your mirror, even if it was out of warranty, Joe would try and call GM and get you a new mirror. and because he was the best salesman in the world, they would do things for Joe. He was doing a lot for GM, and then GM would do things for Joe, and he'd do things for his customers. So it was this circle where everyone who wanted to buy a GM car wanted to buy it from Joe because they'd get better service. And then Joe would send them an anniversary card and a Christmas card and a birthday card, because when he would get to know you selling, the car, he'd say, what's the name of your kid and what's their birthday and how was this? And he'd write it all down. And he had this system of sending out like 12 cards a year to everyone who'd ever bought a car from him, just wishing you well from Joe Girard. And what he was doing is he was making his customers feel important. That's a value. He was reducing their pain. If they had a problem, he'd try and take care of it immediately. He'd go over and above what was expected to reduce pain. So everyone loved Joe Girard. So because everyone loved Joe Girard, he sold more cars he sold 10 times more cars than the next best salesperson in the world. So you have this dynamic. And what I'm illustrating is that you have the kind of the politics of popularity, of those who embody. So you have different levels of social ranking, and these are not always intelligent, I might add. For example, we like tall people better than short people in our cult. There's not really a very good reason for that. Meaning, I'd much rather deal with a kind and honest midget, or whatever the politically correct term is supposed to be today, short person, than I would deal with a tall asshole. Period. But default, we put, there's that term tall, dark, and handsome. Well, this is not terribly intelligent. A small person who's kind and honest in a culture where that is unusual to that degree is going to be able to provide more value. Those inner qualities more valuable than the outer qualities. So you have the how to win friends and influence people, how to, make more money, all of that. And that's part of being useful. And that's a good thing to do. To be in the top 5% of your industry, to poison people less when you're cooking for them, to have healthier organic food. I mean, that's value. Someone comes over and you say, this is from my garden, this is all healthy organic food, this is prepared like this, I've thought about the nutrients, this is going to really nourish your body. Well, that person is providing more value than here's some baked beans from a can, eat it. And so seek to be of value. This will strengthen Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It will also help you grow as a person. How are you going to be more valuable? You're going to have to learn things. You're going to have to learn skills. So that helps you. If you're trying to be more useful to other people, you've got to get bigger yourself. And so this gets into part of the alchemy. Part of the alchemy of a good rule in this particular case is that sometimes the things you do for another person are going to be more important for your well-being than the things you would do for yourself. And I'm newly married. And one of the things that I like about our marriage is that both of us have improved our life in order to be better partners for the other. And it goes both ways, meaning I'll tell my wife, what do you mean you're not going to grow in that area? I don't want to put up with this quality in you for the next 30 years. So it's fine with you that you may think it's, slobbing around in this area is fine, but I don't want to have to put up with that. And so Something she wouldn't do for herself, she'll do for me. And vice versa. It's like, yeah, you're right. That's not good for you. It's not that great for me either. I just didn't care that much. So I'm not going to do that anymore. Well, when you have that virtuous dynamic where you care about another person enough to make positive changes for them, who's the biggest beneficiary? I mean, I'm growing in leaps and bounds because I care enough about my wife to want to make the house better for her. Like I bought her an easel. She likes painting. I bought her an easel. And it's sitting there in the living room with an empty canvas. And it's like, so I'm painting. So my life is richer. Now we have, both of our paintings on the wall. So there's a dynamic, whereas if you think about how can I be most useful to someone else, it's that old adage of the house isn't very clean, but someone's coming over, i.e. someone more important than me, because I've been here and I didn't bother cleaning up the house for the last 3 or 4 days, but someone's coming over, someone else, someone more important, so we're going to clean up the whole house for them. Well, they come for 2 or 3 hours. Who gets to enjoy a clean house for the next week? And so there's a deep alchemy in trying to give the best to the guest, and in doing so, getting to enjoy the fruits of that. The biggest one being that I'm now a bigger person. I get to be more than I was before. And this video, I think, is a classic example of this rule because, let's face it, I wouldn't sit here in front of a blackboard if you weren't here. Now, you're here through the virtue of a camera. So, let's take just a moment here. You're here through the virtue of a camera. But I'm imagining you. And as much as I'm interested in this stuff, and I'm reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, and I'm giving myself that gift, as much as I'm interested in this stuff, I wouldn't sit here and talk to myself. But I'm doing it for you. I'm taking time to do this for you. And as a result, I'm developing my thoughts. This isn't scripted. I sat down and started listening to Jordan's book earlier this afternoon, and I thought, I wonder what my rules would be. And I thought, that's a good thought. And so I thought, well, let's make a video. And so here we are. We're already on Rule 2. But the video was for you. But I'm the first listener, meaning I'm thinking about this. I'm reflecting on my marriage. My wife's catching bits of this. So, she can hear the odd word and stuff, and so she's thinking a few things. That'll probably benefit our future in our marriage. I'm having to give my brain a workout. That's keeping me a little bit in mental shape. I like teaching, so I'm moving towards Maslow's hierarchy of needs of self-esteem, meaning I like that part of myself. Other people like this part of me more often than not. So building love and belonging. And even though there's no money involved and may never be any money involved, there's still a possibility. It's a useful skill to be able to present something, particularly in the information age, to be able to tell a story well, something you need to practice like anything else to get good at. Well, I'm practicing. So there's some growth there. but try and be useful. Now, if you make a list, you could go around to your family. You could go around to your neighborhood, and you could say, I'd like to be useful. How could I be useful? What's the most useful thing I could do for you for 1 hour? Now, if you did this 1 hour a week to 50 neighbors, what's the most useful thing I could do for you in an hour? In 1 year, you'd have given an hour to every neighbor. Every neighbor would be talking about it. Everyone would be saying, did he come over to you? What did he do that's useful for you? Oh, he helped me clean my gutters. He did this, he did that. Oh, well, that's the kind of person we want to, have over for Thanksgiving or send out to the neighborhood and thing. That's the person who's going to get a better sale. Oh, you're having a garage sale. I'll get a better price on something. In other words, there's a natural reciprocity. And in a culture that is a pack mammalian species, that's where we depend on each other. If you've got 50 neighbors that you've done an hour of useful things for, and the car breaks down, and you don't have the $200 for the taxi, and you need to run out to the airport right now because your daughter's coming in from out of town, you're probably going to find one person who'd let you borrow their car, and then you'd give them back a full tank of gas and stuff like that, and you're out the door. You see, and so it's a really good rule. How can I be useful? It's actually how I met my wife. I thought we would never, ever connect, but she wanted to meet me. And so I thought, well, let me try and be useful. And so at dinner on our first date, I said, tell me about your life. She told me, and I said, do you have any challenges? And she told me this and that. And I said, okay, so you've got some challenges here and here, so what's the problem? And she communicated over the course of a few hours 5 problems she was having. And as I say, I wasn't at all interested in dating. It wasn't fitting my little box of the good match. And so I said, here's what I'll do. I'll say, here are 5 things that you can do to do this. And I'm going to give you one of my books. And if you read the book, most people don't. If you read the book, if you listen and you do these things and you want to tell me how it went or talk some more, fine. You can email me here. Bye. And I thought no more about it. A week later, I get an email. She read the book. She liked the book. It was useful. She did those other 4 things. They were useful. Her life was better. So how can I help now? Well, there's this and this and that. So we just went back and forth. Pretty soon it was a daily thing. She was, and her life was just transforming before my eyes. I thought, this is so much fun. I can be of value. But of course, the next thing I notice is this is the most fun I'm having in any area of my life because there's flow. I'm able to make a difference. But I'm also thinking, it's like, wow, I've never met anyone who's this on it. You tell people, read this book, and yeah, and you meet them a year later, and they haven't even bought it, and so, it's this constant entropy, or nothing flows and gets done. And I thought, what would it be like to live with a woman who just does stuff today and grows? I mean, that sounds like an exciting life. One that wasn't on my list because I'd never experienced anything quite so dynamic, quite so interesting. And so I tried to be useful. And I'm a pretty demanding guy in a number of ways. And so, but before we had our second date, we'd had several weeks of emails and stuff. And in that whole time, I spent 15 minutes a day being useful for her. And her life was just transforming, just hundreds of percent in value and this. And, these are the most rewarding 15 minutes of my day. Well, when it came time for her, like my attitude in relationship is first. And so I'll give 100% in relationship, but I want someone who shows up 100%. Well, when it came time for me to say, well, I want you to do this and I want you to do this to invest in our relationship, if I hadn't been useful to her, if I hadn't been more useful to her than any other person in her entire life, she might have balked. Why should I do that for you? The normal narcissistic thing. Why should I invest in our future? Well, what's it going to do for me today? The classic greed poverty cycle. I don't want to give anything, so I don't get anything in the future. I don't get anything now, so I don't want to give anything again. And I've met a few jerks who took everything and never gave anything back, so I don't want to do that. But, when you start with investing at that level, she was right there. And so if you have someone else, if you can partner with someone else who's trying to be as useful as possible, and I think that's a great recipe in a relationship, by the way, to say, how can I bring you the most value and reduce as much unnecessary suffering? How can I bring you the most value? And here's how you can bring me the most value. And do we have an intelligent intention of reciprocally bringing each other the most value? Now, in order to be useful, you've got to have information. You've got to have skills. And in order to be useful, they've got to be useful skills. For the purpose of this video, talking to you about C++ is not going to be useful in sharing 12 rules for life. The fact that I've read 500 books in the last 5 years is useful, because the best way to have something worth teaching is to read and listen to a lot of great thinkers, a lot of great teachers, and admire them and say, oh, I like this bit and I like that bit. And so for me, one of the things I've liked the most is the personal anecdotes, which is one reason as a teenager when I was studying for success, I read a lot of biographies. And I actually learned a pivotal thing in my business, which you can see in another video series of mine, from Henry Ford Sr., the founder of the Ford Motor Company. And so, but it was being able to imagine other people's lives, imagine how and why they were doing things, and to be able to put myself in their shoes and then say, well, how could I apply that in my life? And I've always gotten much more from that from just kind of do this and then do that, grow your sales, make 2 calls. I can relate more with the personal anecdote. And so I bring a lot of that into this, which also in its roundabout way is valuable, because I get to remember what worked in the past and think about how I could apply that more tomorrow or today. So, for example, I learned cooking at age 13. And I learned it because I was in a boarding school where they basically had hot dogs and buns, and I'd never had such terrible food. And that was a mainstay. And so I thought, I'm going to have to cook some good food here. And so I started smelling, I'm 13 years old, And I've never read a recipe book, and they don't have any recipe books, and the internet wasn't alive with phones and all that time. So what I'm doing at 13 years old is I'm smelling herbs. I'm saying, tasting herbs, and it's like, this herb with this herb could be nice if something was done like this. And then I'm making smoothies, and I made all these types of smoothies with different teas. Like I'd have like 2 lemon zingers and 2 red zingers and a banana and some honey and a bit of lemon, and blend that all up. And how does that taste? And how does it taste hot? How does it taste cold? It's like, oh, this is interesting. And so pretty soon, I was inventing, dozens of recipes a week. And then pretty soon the other kids at the boarding school wanted to eat my food. And then they were jealous that their food wasn't as good as mine. And so the school actually hired me. It was one of my first jobs and my only cooking job. The school hired me, it was a small school, to cook for the other boys 1 meal a week, so they could, wouldn't feel there was this big separation. And that was useful. This is crappy food. I have to be useful for myself. I got to learn a useful skill. Everyone eats 3 meals a day. If you learn how to cook great food, it's going to be useful some of the time. If you learn how to drive, it's going to be useful. If you learn how to cut hair, it's going to be useful. If you can give a good massage, it's going to be useful. If you can have a great conversation with someone, it's going to be useful. If you can make love in a way that brings out the beauty and presence of your partner, that's useful. So try and be useful in its most mundane, practical sense. How can I be useful? Is a great skill, and it's a great path to follow. See, I'm already thinking, I haven't talked with all 50 of my neighbors and tried to be useful, so I'm already thinking that's not a bad idea. Because I've kind of maxed out a lot of my usefulness for the last 2 years. I've been on a constant quest to be more useful to my wife. And I've learned and grown a lot in that process, but I haven't really expanded that so much into the neighborhood. But I did have my richest connection with neighbors was I created a chalkboard for the community, the neighbors. I created a stone bench for the neighbors. I created a little arbor for the neighbors. I created a dog drinking bowl for the neighbors. And I put chalks there, and then I put doggy bags. And the neighbors have been enjoying that immensely. I'll write something on the chalkboard like, what are you grateful for? Or what's your favorite vacation place? And as people walk by throughout the neighborhood, they write their answers. And I've done neighborhood art where I've put paint out, and all the neighbors have painted a bit of this big neighborhood painting. And then I hung it on the garage wall so that they could enjoy their own art. So this is a small, useful step, and it's actually brought me more close to the neighbors than any other thing that I've done living here for 15 years. It was just, how can I be useful and engage and communicate that? There's a deeper level, though, that I want you to consider, and I want you to look to know the deepest part of who you are, what's uniquely you at an essential or soul level. This is a part of you that wants to blossom, that wants to express itself, that given the right environment will open organically. You don't have to do anything. And you discover that you want to teach, or you want to bond and connect with children, or you want to care for the elderly, or you want to engineer things, or you want to write code at this level. And there's something beautiful in that to you. It speaks to your soul, your sense of beauty, truth, and goodness. This is who I am. I like this. It touches me. That's a talent, a gift. And you have, what's the gift about it is that that's part of your nature. That's an easy thing that wants to bloom. The skill needs to be developed. You want to bond. Well, now you've got to deal with parents. If you want to bond with children, you've got to deal with parents. You've got to deal with them culturally, politically. You've got to deal, there's economic, there's logistical influences. You want to deal with them. Okay, you're going to have to learn to drive. There's all this software and interface to bring that technology to life. And developing that technology, there's two separate, it has to be done. That doesn't just come about. And I'm thinking of the fact that for much of my life, I felt deprived not having this quality of communication because it's very rich for me. And most people don't have the attention span for it. And nobody has ever called up in my life and said, Dane, I'd love to listen to you for 2 hours to talk about this, or I'd like to talk to you for 2 hours and hear your thoughts and ideas. No one's ever done that. And so there's a gift there, meaning there's a talent that wants to come out, that's been wanting to come out for decades, and it's emerging. And it's emerging in a context, meaning this is fifth iteration. Meaning when this first started bubbling out, it's just like, I've got to do something. The lighting is terrible. It's a crappy phone. It's a crappy microphone. There's no stabilization. There's no chalkboard. There's no seat. There's no anything. There's none of this. And then I'm out of practice, and so I'm stumbling along, and I get through an hour, and it's like, is this ever going to be any good? I have no idea. Next another hour. And after a few hundred hours, it's like, oh, I can feel this is still something there. So I'm going to do some more. Maybe I'll get a nicer camera. Maybe I'll watch a few videos on how to film things, okay? And then another few hours, and it's like, this lighting isn't good. So since I'm spending all this time doing this, might as well get some better lighting. And then the neighbors drive by on their heavy diesel trucks and ruin the audio. And so it's like, I need a place in the house. And then, I'm doing this. And so it gets better and better and better. The interface, the technology, the location, the idea, the experience, and then the subjects shift with time as well. But it's a process of growing a skill that expresses a talent. And one way to learn what your talent might be is to ask some of your friends, what's something that's about me that's beautiful that you don't find in, 1 in 100 people or 1 in 1,000 people? What is that? And listen and see if they're paying any attention and see you at all. Ask yourself that. What is it? What could a role be that would allow me to be myself? And so this is a deeper octave of this goal, and you can start with the higher, with the higher octave, because you can be useful to anyone, anytime, just by making the effort to be useful, and that will strengthen social relationships and ties and all of that. Now, here again, you'll find, if referencing the different cultural analysis, I tried to approach a couple of my neighbors, and in some cultures, there's actually a fear of the unknown, a fear of connection, and so they seemed scared that someone in the neighborhood would actually want to say hello. And so if you're in America and in such a neighborhood, don't take that personally. If you go around to all of your neighbors, and this is me, and I'd like to introduce myself, and you you talk a little, and maybe I can have you over for dinner or something like that, and then you get to know them, and then you say, well, what would be really useful? What do you need and stuff? And you make an hour investment to do something for them. That's so unusual in our culture. It may be the only time that any neighbor has ever done that for them in their life, or in 10 years, or in this neighborhood, maybe in another Midwestern neighborhood where people are more friendly, and then they can tell you, like, wow, I've missed this. I've really wanted to have a more neighbor. Well, how can we do that? What do you need? Well, when this and this, and you build a stronger tie so that there's safety, there's familiarity, there's trust and trustworthiness, and now you're smiling at people as you're driving by, as opposed to just in your own world, and you're more outside of yourself, which is a healthy direction. It's taking you more outward into the world, where 99.9% of everything is. So that completes Rule 2. Be useful. Make a disciplined amount of time to be useful to the people that matter to you. Start with the people close and radiate out. Be useful to yourself. Figure out what things you could learn that would be useful. For example, some of you with internet businesses, you could read a book called Search Engine Optimization. I read 3 of those books, and my website became one of the highest search optimized websites in the country for my business. In the top 5 for more than 20 keywords without any payments. Well, that's a useful thing for me. But when you have a useful thing for you, then that's something you can share with other people. Move towards understanding what your true gifts are, what your talent is, what's unique inside you that wants to come out, that brings you joy, that you feel, I'm me when this comes out. And go through the much harder process and discipline in our culture of finding a way that you can express that integrates you with others, that takes you a step closer to the life that you want to be living. I hope this has been useful for you, and I'm still working on the way to connect and interact, but I'd certainly love to hear how this has benefited you in your life, and maybe that will give an idea to me of something that I can do to further improve my own life. And thank you so much for watching.